Hello, it is the Culture Genie. This episode will be about a lesser known breadbasket and source of food for most of the old world. At least lesser known in comparison to Egypt and the rivers of Mesopotamia. The region I intend to speak about is northern western North Africa, or the region that is called Al-maghrib in Arabic. Pretty much modern day Libya and everything west of it, and north of the Sahara Desert. This is a region that has known human settlements from pretty early, as there are archaeological evidence for various early settlements that date back to even the pre-Neolithic age that is before agriculture, as this region made for good hunting grounds for early humans, with plenty of game to hunt and an abundance of eatable plants, some which would go on to become mainstay crops of agriculture later, with crops such as African millet and vegetables such as lettuce. And after the introduction of agriculture, you have a lot of peoples living in this area. As later we have Berber tribes, Semitic Carthaginians, later the Romans after them, then the Germanic Vandals, then the Eastern Romans again taking control of the area, then we have the Arabic invasions, and Berber tribes again retaking power at certain times. And then eventually also the colonization made by Western powers, such as the Spanish and the French, who tried to colonize the area. Throughout history, several wars, invasions, and campaigns of conquest have been waged for this territory of northwestern Africa and its riches. There is a reason as to why this region was so desired by so many conquerors, such as the Romans, and that is that this region is quite fertile, then as now. To illustrate this, Morocco and Algeria each have more arable land than Italy, about 78,000 square kilometers for Morocco and about 74,000 square kilometers for Algeria, respectively, in comparison to Italy's about 69,000 square kilometers. And what was the Roman province of Africa Minor, that is say modern-day Tunisia and Libya, is currently at about 48,000 square kilometers. More than Hungary's 30,000 square kilometers of arable land. The entire region taken together, in comparison to other countries' territory that was within the Roman Empire, only France and Turkey exceed this region of northwestern Africa in arable land, and that is due to modern agriculture, something that I at least know has been an issue to implement in modern day Tunisia due to administrative, legal and political reasons, meaning that this region could theoretically have even more land to cultivate, if the same is true for Morocco and Algeria. In short, this is a region with large amounts of arable land, and it is arable land of high quality, with much nutrients for crops. Also, because of the latitude of the North African coastal region, it is much better suited for easy agriculture than much of Europe, as the growing seasons are longer and the rainfall is quite adequate to supply the crops on large fields. And it comes at regular intervals, depending upon the season, making seeding and harvests easily plannable. It should be noted that northwestern Africa sits roughly at the same latitudes as most of the most productive farming land in North America. And as we know, there is a tremendous amount of food from farms in Texas, California, Arkansas, or is it Arkansas? Anyway, from that state, and also from the same regions in Mexico. And this is because of long growing seasons, good fertile soil, and regular irrigation due to regular rainfalls. The same has held and holds true for northwestern Africa. Just because northwestern Africa includes huge swaths of the Sahara Desert doesn't mean that the fertile Mediterranean lands of North Africa are any less significant than those of Europe that don't have neighboring large deserts. During Roman times, many Roman emperors devoted huge amounts of capital on projects that developed northwestern Africa as an agricultural hotspot, creating great slave plantation estates called latifundia across the fertile land of northwestern Africa. And in the 3rd century AD, northwestern Africa took over from Egypt as the location where the grain for Rome's Annona, which was a kind of social service system of giving grain to the poor, was grown. Likely because the region was growing almost as much grain as Egypt and was much closer to Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire, making for a quicker and less dangerous boat journey of shipment than grain coming all the way to the Roman port of Ostia from Alexandria in Egypt. And these grain transports were truly enormous and included several hundred thousands of tons each year of grain to the capital of Rome only, meaning there was even more to other places in the Roman Empire. By the way, the boats used to freight this grain transport, they were bigger than any boat built in Europe after the fall of the Western Roman Empire until the 17th century, and ships of this size, above 50 meters or 160 feet, did not start to become common again until the end of the 18th century. All of this is to say that northwestern Africa was the breadbasket of the Western Roman Empire, and arguably its most important province after Italy. The region was also very easily defended as the Sahara Desert acted as a natural barrier. And by the time the Vandals invaded Africa, according to Malcolm Todd, in May of 428 AD, they had no problem taking over northwestern Africa as there was only one legion stationed there. And the Vandals devastated the area with their conquest and cut off the grain supply to the rest of the Western Roman Empire when they invaded. Thus, these Germanic migratory invaders caused a chain effect of large-scale famine elsewhere in the Western Roman Empire, and were a large part of why the Western Roman Empire collapsed so brutally and totally in the 5th century. The Eastern Roman Empire would later retake the area. However, the Eastern Roman Empire is maybe also responsible for closing off northwestern Africa from the rest of Europe by forbidding trade with non-Roman controlled European entities. Eastern Roman control of northwestern Africa was also followed later by the Arabic Islamic conquest under the Umayyad Caliphate dynasty, which definitively closed off trade between northwestern Africa and Christian Europe. Northwestern Africa would also later be used as a springboard to conquer the Iberian Peninsula. And the land of northwestern Africa would actually be used as a reward for warriors participating in the jihad of conquering the Iberian Peninsula, as the warriors who participated in the jihad into the Iberian Peninsula actually were promised land in the Maghrib area if they followed on the jihad into Europe. Then later during the Abbasid revolution, when the Abbasids tried to overthrow the Umayyads fought tooth and nail to keep control of the northwestern African area from the Abbasids, and managed to keep the western parts of this area from the Abbasids. Due to the enormous farm yields concentrated on the North African coast, groups could be made loyal to the Umayyads, holding these territories through tribute in the form of food or use of the land, and did become the economic backbone of the Umayyad rule for a short while. No, not the Iberian Peninsula, or Al-Andalus as it was called, because while the Umayyads did move to the Iberian Peninsula, that was more due to military strategic reasons and not due to economic reasons. However, relying upon proxy groups in northwestern Africa would also become the downfall of the Umayyad control of that area, as the groups that the Umayyads had relied upon joined other rebellions against the Umayyads, such as the Idrisid dynasty, which would take over most of Morocco. As the first truly strong local political entity in northwestern Africa since the times of the Carthaginians, a little bit less than 1,000 years earlier. In any case, during most of early Arabic Islamic rule of northwestern Africa, the area flourished again, and the region was comparable to Iraq and southern Arabia, the richest territories in early Islamic Arabic history, and actually richer than Egypt in certain regards, which had been a traditional place of affluence for most of North African and Middle Eastern history, though the region of Egypt would return as being more prosperous than northwestern Africa later, under the Fatimid dynasty, but that is later. Speaking about the Fatimid dynasty, they actually began in the area of Tunis and Algeria, and their first target of conquest was to conquer and raid the rest of northwestern Africa, with the help of the Kutama Berber tribe, their allies. The riches of western North Africa would fuel the Fatimid conquests of Egypt and further eastward. Following the Fatimids, the area of northwestern Africa would host a lot of various political entities that would vie for control of this fertile area. This plurality of entities would also recreate a lot of the trade that had existed before between North Africa and Europe, as there no longer existed any singular strong entity that could impose trade restrictions. So, around the time of the first millennium AD, a lot of trade happened between North Africa and various European political entities, though this trade was usually dominated around the first centuries after the first millennium AD by the Italian cities of Genoa and Pisa, who traded a lot of goods in exchange for, among other things, grain and other plantation goods, such as cotton, that would be turned into textiles in Italy. And this more mutual trade would later be replaced by more colonial trade relationships by the greater powers of Europe when they grew into power during the early Enlightenment age of the 17th and 19th centuries, eventually ending in outright full-scale colonization during the 19th century. And one of the reasons for these conquests was the enormous yields of the farmland of this region. Speaking about the region and the farmland, a geographic feature of the Maghrib region, or northwestern Africa, is that the fertile soil is crisscrossed with mountains, forests, rivers and lakes, which create natural barriers for military conquest, and allows a lot of local independence, as local food production can easily meet local demands. This means that any ruler that ruled these lands often had to do compromises with regional powers in a lot of ways, allowing local free cities along the coast or tribal areas where one group or the other had a greater local say than the central rulership. This is probably why the French had such problems pacifying, for example, Algeria outside of some key cities in the 19th and 20th centuries. And this degree of local independence through natural geographic factors dividing the fertile land is probably a part of why the Sunni Maliki school of Islamic jurisprudence was promoted by the early Umayyads, or rather accepted by the Umayyads, and also why it remained as the dominant school of Islamic jurisprudence and survived to this day, as the Maliki school has a principle of trying to integrate local customs and allow great regionalism in its judicial thinking and practices, especially when it comes to land usage, which, considering the varied geography of this region, would have been very suitable for it. Thus the Maliki school's regionalism was both required and demanded by the local conditions of this area. The only other Sunni school that challenged it was the literalist Zahiri school, which has pretty much died out. There is also another thing to discuss that has to do with geography and farming. And that is due to the intensive farming that was needed during the farming seasons, together with the rather harsh conditions of the farming in the heat of the northwestern African climate. Slavery was practiced to meet the work needs. And actually, the need for slaves to work on these fields in northwestern Africa does explain a lot of the slave raids that early Muslim rulers and the later Berber pirates that were active in the area did, where they took millions of slaves to work on the fields, many from the coast of Europe, to work on large landed estates, just like the Romans had done with their latifundia. So this was not something new and is something constant in the history of this region. And it was a matter of practicality and economics. Still, from the cursory overview I have done, it seems that the slave usage in northwestern Africa was somewhat lesser than in the eastern parts of the Islamic world during the early medieval age and later periods. Anyway, this was a short overview video about this historically important fertile breadbasket that has often been overlooked, and I hope you liked it. If you have any questions or other comments, please post them, and please also like this video.
Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities. اشترك بالقناة من فضلكم.